savings time, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
We won't have to change it ever again. It's okay.
When they see that, I can see Massachusetts and Minnesota.
It's not great reports to the Midwest.
or I can see that I'm moving here.
Yeah. You already are in it. All right, I think we're all set to go.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. We will start with the invocation from Vice Mayor Carroll.
We're thankful for this town and its residents. We're grateful for all their work for the betterment of our community and all who serve on this behalf. Let those who work here and those who serve here be ever mindful of the town's vision and mission statement. Grant this council the wisdom to govern under the conflicting interests and issues of our times, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, personal peace in our lives, and joy in our task. Amen.
As we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I think it's important at this time to appreciate the freedom that we have and to think and pray for the people of Ukraine as they engage in the struggle for their own freedom. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are being live streamed by...
Ryan Blade with Indian River News.
All right, thank you. Welcome to the town.
Thank you.
Let's take the roll call, please.
Councilmember Smith. Here. Councilmember Hendricks.
Here.
Mayor Foley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Allard.
Here.
Excellent.
All right, item 2 on the agenda. Are there any requests to reorder, delete items, or any emergency additions to the agenda? If there are none, I would ask for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3 on the agenda, presentations and proclamations. This is a week where we do not have any, so we may move on to comment 4, item 4 rather, which are comments from the public regarding the agenda items. Are there any comments from the public today? No comments. All right, we may move on to item number 5, which is the consent agenda. If there are no comments on the consent agenda or further action on that, if I can have a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We are up to item number 6, Mayor's report. Given our healthy momentum, I will not take long. Feel a little pressure, but I'm just kidding. Really 3 items. The gift that keeps on giving, a water dispute with the city of Vero Beach. I will defer to the town attorney and the town manager who will provide the details, but as an overview, basically we have two actions for those in the public that are aware of it. The first legal action is in state court. That consists of the town's insistence that the city of Vero Beach honor its obligations under the contract to provide water at the same rates as the Coastal County rates. There was a motion for summary judgment, which was filed by the city of Vero Beach. Oral argument was heard by Judge Krum on that in the state court action, and we are awaiting a ruling on that, which basically could be any day, but I would defer to the town attorney in terms of any more precise time that he may have on it. In the second case, which is the federal lawsuit involving an antitrust violation claimed by the town, should the city continue to insist upon its claim that the county is prevented from discussing or negotiating with the town for water services because of a permanent exclusive service area. There was a dispositive motion that was filed by the city to dismiss the case. That has been what is referred to as fully briefed, so papers are all submitted. There was an oral argument scheduled for April 11, which I will attend. Anybody from the public is welcome to attend, as well as council members, and that is in Fort Pierce. The other item on that was, as reported in the press, despite the agreement between our council in the 164 proceeding and the city of Vero Beach Council to move the case along as quickly as possible, somehow the lawyers for the city didn't get the memo, and they sought a much longer track for the case than than was possible under the rules for the federal district court hearing the case. We pressed the position on behalf of the town that we should get as quick a resolution as possible. Again, I'll defer to the town attorney with the specifics of that, but basically, we wanted a trial date in December of 2022, and the court gave us January of 2023, a much shorter track, quicker track than what the city's lawyers were pursuing. So why the lawyers deviated from what their counsel instructed them to do, we can speculate about, but the important thing is that we're on a quick track. All right, we have the charter review. We had our meeting last week. Thank you again to all the members of the charter review committee who did really outstanding work. It's always nice when you have a committee that does work like that, because it makes the council's job so much easier, and you really nail most, if not all, of the issues. We do have some things to review when we get to that agenda item down at item 8B. Really, the only substantive issue I see is we initially contemplated having the town attorney eliminated as a charter officer, and I will concede that I thought that, much like the town clerk, there were many jurisdictions that had town attorneys that were not charter officers. Upon the research done by our town attorney, it turns out we'd be the first one to do that. And in thinking about it, I'm not sure this is an issue that we really want to get the case of first impression on. It's the way the town attorney works with the town manager is extremely different than the way the town clerk works and interacts with the town manager and council. So while I thought initially that it sounds like it's a pretty good idea for reporting purposes, I think we should reconsider that as we discuss that later on this afternoon. Okay, let's see, what other items do we have? Legislative updates. I know Mr. Alwater is going to talk about multi-story building inspections. That bill died this year. Whether it's taken up again, if there is a special session, remains to be seen. Probably we're going to see it next year, I think, coming back. Other bills that died that we're following carefully is the proposed legislation by Mr. Fine, who got a co-sponsor rather, that would prohibit utilities that receive public funding for their utility work, infrastructure, maintenance, however that funding comes down. If they receive those public funds, they would be prohibited from transferring funds from the utility to the general fund, which is basically a restriction on running a profit in your utility for being very crude about this, and then transferring those monies over to the general fund. That's obviously an issue of concern to us as we go forward with our issues. That's it for me.
Mayor, did that bill move forward to the governor?
No. In fact, I don't know that we got the hearing stage. I think I ran out of time. Not unusual. Good bills in Florida legislature oftentimes don't get referred to the committee because there's a very tight window for the committees to meet and consider them. But it got more traction than I thought it would.
I know the city of Orlando recently used to, when I was involved, when we were all involved in the electric sale transfers, a huge chunk of money from WC. The recollection was about $60 million. So they were a strong proponent, or a strong opponent, to that bill. I'm sure the Jack probably.
Yes, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. There are some pretty strong forces on the other side as well.
Sure.
So we'll just have to wait, see, monitor, and then take action and support obviously the bills that are in the best interest of our taxpayers. That's it for me. If there are any other questions from the council, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. On to item 7, Councilman Alwater.
Okay. Well, as the mayor pointed out, the state legislature did not act in terms of setting up standards for so-called milestone inspections of multi-story buildings along the ocean. And reading some of the press, the sense I got was where it broke down was in terms of what would be the requirements to the HOA or condo association after they received the report that indicated that there was an issue. I just wanted to bring it up here, and I don't have any preconceived notions of how to move forward, if anything, but on this. But the reality is that we are a oceanside community, and on the dais in front of you is something that the town manager put together, just listing multi-story buildings that he provided to Lisa Zana from 32963 in response to a request. It just so happened that in your package you have here before you, one of the newsletters that I get, that this working group of Florida building professionals looks like all the people you think that you would want to have involved in coming up with recommendations. I'll just read a couple of them here. The Florida Engineering Society, the Florida Structural Engineers Association, section of the Florida Section American Society of Civil Engineers, and so forth. And it's the American Institute of Architects that they've come up with some, at least preliminary recommendations about how to approach this. And I provided the slide deck, and it looked like to me, if you go to page 4 of the slide deck, which would have been page 18 of the packet, that a lot of recommendations were in line with the current requirements of Miami-Dade Municipal Code for building recertification. And then they also point out later, if you go to page 8 of the slide deck, page 22 of the overall packet, it says here, the International Code Council on Coordination with the Florida Building Commission is currently finalizing a document titled, quote, Ensuring the Safety of Existing Buildings, which addresses periodic and milestone settings of building structures, and talks about different things like that. The reason for me bringing it here is maybe just to start to have a dialogue. If there's an approach we want to take, I think anything that we want to do would certainly require a lot more information and feedback from our building official and our town manager. Maybe we wait until these final standards are completed and decide how we might want to move forward. Do nothing. We could talk about just requiring milestone inspections to meet these standards that might be filed with the building official and given to the homeowners association, or we could do the inspections ourselves, which I would not recommend. We don't have staff, and we can get too many other things to do. So my point in all this is just to start to have a dialogue on how we might want to proceed forward in terms of analyzing this situation. So we can't have this type of problem here. So I would turn it over to my fellow colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Elber. Other comments from council?
I would just say several years ago, the state was asked to look at requiring septic tank inspections, but annually or on a 3 to 5 year basis. And they never voted on that, just to pull the trigger because it costs money.
Yeah.
And I heard they didn't pull the trigger on this because it costs money, and the money was pretty extensive. But I've heard through my real estate association activities that banks, when they purchase new store, our new loan on the condo, we're now asking for more information from the condo association as far as their annual report, but also related to their board of directors meetings to see what they're doing about maintenance or any other issues for the banks. This is only hearsay, are starting to look at it closer, so there is some interest in this.
Any other comments from council? Great. Well, I think it's a credit that you brought this issue up. The context it's arisen in meetings that Jim and I had with certain HOAs is as the legislation was pending, we alerted them that they may have a requirement, and so they may want to set aside some money in the rainy day fund should the state ever, actually it's a reimposition of the requirement, because there used to be a statute that required it. It was then either sunsetted or repealed, I forget which, because it was found to be expensive and burden on associations. We told them you may want to put some money away because you for inspection, which can be a not inexpensive proposition to have Kenny Horn structural engineers come in. And then we all know if there's an inspection that says you have rebar crumbling, banks will see in 10 years, that never happens. There's always going to be some kind of remediation, otherwise the inspections aren't going to be very meaningful. I see two concerns, major concerns on the town's part from getting involved in it. And that's assuming we're not preempted by a state statute, because we could go through a lawmaking procedure, much like the short-term rentals, and then find out that all the work we've done has been preempted next year if they take it up. The other issue is that's assuming it's not preempted, the liability potential for the town. Should we have a regime in place that actively involves the town in some kind of oversight or mandate that these inspections occur, particularly if we use town building people to do it, which I agree with you, I don't think we have the manpower really to efficiently, or the skills set to really efficiently do that. So that's a concern I think, we need to think about seriously as we move forward with this. And then, the other issue is just the teeth that, as a municipality, we could put into this if we found an inspection. We saw that there were things that we may correct, and then the homeowners association disagrees with that and says, we're fine with it. We may find ourselves in an unintended morass of legal entanglements with homeowners associations. So it's a very, very important issue, and it's something we need to really think about carefully. I note that the county has not seen fit to do anything on the county level yet, and it sounds to me like they're monitoring it, but I'm not sure they will. Now, does that mean we do nothing? No. I think certainly, and I had a brief discussion with the town attorney about this. I think certainly we can have a campaign of encouragement and education, telling the homeowners associations they really need to do this, and council, in Hendrick's point, potentially alert them that your insurance companies, on your master policies, be required this as well. So I'm happy to move forward on this. Have some objection from council, and I think we have two very bright individuals at the left end of the podium, Pete and Jim, to come up with some recommendations and come back to us at a future date.
Can I just
Sure.
ask a question? Do you think the town would have potential liability if, say, for hypothetically, we said you have to have a milestone inspection subject to one of these standards, and you must file it with the town and give it to the HOA or condo association members, and then that's the end of it, and it's their job to do something. Lewis would not be responsible for assessing whether it was done properly or not. Because frankly, I don't think there'd be an issue, because an engineer firm would come and do it, be concerned about getting itself sick. But do you think the town in that scenario would still potentially have some liability?
Try as I might to not be a lawyer up here. I will tell you what I would tell any client, and that's I don't know. I can envision a scenario where if we even had something that simple, and God forbid a building collapsed and we couldn't find the inspection report, it wasn't filed, we didn't have a sufficient record of anything. Knowing enterprising plaintiffs' lawyers, they would probably say, but for the fact that you didn't require that piece of paper to be filed, they would have had the inspection, and it's all your fault. You were named and captioned. So I don't know the scenarios, Councilman, but I'm not rejecting it. I'm just saying it's something we need to really think about.
I come here with the idea of handing you folks a sheet of paper and say, this is how we need to move forward. I think it's certainly worthy.
Absolutely. So
I have a question.
Yes.
The buildings that we list here, especially like Victoria, the older ones, do they have rules now that say they have to have inspections?
No.
They don't?
No. It used to be a state statute, and then it was either sunset or repealed. I forget which. You can help me out on this, but the complaint was that homeowners associations were being required to spend significant amounts of money to have inspections that many times resulted in nothing. And I don't think it was limited to waterfront communities days, I think it was really any multi-story building, that, and then it got abandoned because it was complained that being too expensive for the homeowners associations. So, but well-run homeowners associations obviously have an interest in making sure the buildings don't fall down. And you rely upon the residents, obviously, to make sure that their board is doing the right thing.
Yeah, there's some condo associations throughout this area, let's put it that way, that have elevators that don't work, so they just close it down. Seriously. That's terrible. So, because it's $400,000, it's not expensive. I think the law would make sense if they would approve it, but I'm not going to go against the state.
Yes, sir.
If it would not be out of order, I would be interested in hearing Mr. Copeland's comments, if any, on, there are a dozen buildings in Johns Island listed on this sheet. What, if any, discussions, initiatives Johns Island Property Owners Association has taken or intended to take with regard to this issue?
We have not taken any because CCSI manages. Oh, sorry.
No problem. Please.
Mike Farquhar, general manager of John's Island. We have not taken any because of John's Island Property Owners Association is the master association. CCSI, who manages all the condominiums on the property, that's their responsibility to take that. And I can't speak for them if they've taken any initiatives. I know they did do some things after that incident in Miami, but I don't think they hired any inspectors to come to do official inspections.
Okay, Mike, can I ask a question?
Sure.
When I lived on the beach in the townhouses, and that was a while ago, I remember that they replaced all of our porches. And I thought, why did they do it? So was that CCSI that determined our porches weren't good?
They had an engineer come in and look at the.
I have no idea. All I know is that they were going to replace our porches and we had to pay for it. So that was probably through that CCSI.
CCSI and would have had an engineer come in and look at the structure of the building for the proper permits to do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farquhar. All right, well, we have no greater responsibility than ensuring the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. So, thank the councilman for bringing the issue up in the comments from council, and I think we have a way forward. So, if you two gentlemen will prepare a report for April and May meeting, whichever you think is reasonable, that would be terrific, and I think we'll all be interested in hearing it.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Council, there is a slight chance that there may be a special session.
Yeah.
The last company that I saw, is that I remember seeing, is not requiring, but certainly open to it. So I would respectfully ask that May would be appropriate, because in the event that this does become a special session issue, I think to the point that the state takes the lead on this, we may be preempted in talking about something that they already addressed.
Mayor Jude is fine, I think, unless anybody has an objection. Here's the lawyer who's saving us money, because you're not doing the work, it's going to get preempted. So I appreciate that, so.
I think you might know.
I think the issue at hand is the insurance costs.
Yes, sir.
So this is a cost that's going to go this way. A little chance.
All right, well, if relevant still, we'll look forward to it in June. And anyway, I'm not sure that's going to get taken up, but even if it does, we may have some delegated unfunded mandate pursuant to that statute to oversee as well. So we'll talk about that then. All right, thank you very much. So we're now going to go to item 8, which is the designation of the interim town clerk. After Laura's retirement, Shelley has been filling in admirably, working harder, working more hours, and basically my understanding, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Hornbrain, is that we need somewhat official designation so that she can do the duties of the town clerk, sign documents as the formally designated interim town clerk, such as ordinances and things that require the official seal of the town clerk. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Hornbrain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Because of certain ministerial and stature legal requirements, requesting the designation for Shelley pending the hiring of a new full-time town clerk. I think from a historical job task evaluation, I think that the council
should determine an amount, a monthly stipend, while Shirley's actually acting as a town clerk. And looking at that, I don't think that $2,000 a month is unreasonable, given the tasks and the responsibilities that she would have until we get her place in town.
Is there discussion? Questions?
How did we determine Heather's?
I thought that
Heather became town manager.
We settled on a salary of $2,500 a month, just while I was doing the duties. We just kind of sat on that.
Yeah, my recollection is that it was not consistent with what Joe was making, but it was commensurate with the increased duties and responsibilities, and, you know, you basically pull a number out of the air with this stuff. There's really no rhyme or reason.
Okay, so is that how you determined what you thought Shelley should receive?
Yes.
Okay.
Evaluating what they've gotten, took a look at the relative responsibilities and settled on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Shelley, I'm sure you're happy. I heard you would have done it for $1,500, but.
That was a week.
All right, do you need a
Yes.
motion? Is there a motion to approve the town manager's recommendation?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you again, Kelly, for stepping in and doing this. I know how hard you're working on these cases. It's greatly appreciated. All right, we're going to move to item 8B, which is the review of the proposed town charter amendments. I discussed the town attorney issue, and then we had something brought to our attention through the town attorney and in his discussions with the supervisor of elections, and that is the possibility of a mail-in ballot for this, as opposed to putting this on the ballot during election day. And the mail-in ballot, of course, my question was, how much more is it going to cost? And I'll let you speak to that, but it's nothing more. It's basically the same amount, and there are some virtues that the town attorney wants to explore with us on doing that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pete Jim to take us through the amendments, and then any comments from council, discussion from council, we can proceed with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. So let me just start by saying I appreciate your patience, and I know that there was a couple iterations of providing the documents back to you, again, formatting and technology, but I believe you have the two versions that allow you to see what formally was there in the red line and a legislative version, that although there are some slight formatting issues, will certainly be addressed in final form prior to submission. As this council knows, this will require an ordinance, so we'll be coming back to you next month in all likelihood, but that also is consistent with the question related to the general election versus special election. I'll delve into that in just 1 second. I also want to mention, thank you, Councilman Alwala, that there are two sections where the language was discussed and again, for formatting reasons, was left out, but there's verbiage at the end of section 1.2, powers, that was discussed and approved. It goes into the last clause as provided for in the Florida Constitution and laws of Florida as amended from time to time. Again, the point behind that was to protect us in the event that any of the state level changes happen, we would be in compliance with by de facto our charter, state law. The second area, again, had to do with section 2-15 boards. And this language was also discussed because, again, there are state laws typically related to auditing and having a council member. And so we also added, their language should be added and was approved during the discussion at the end of 2-1.5-.2, at the very end, where it says, which they have created, unless required by the laws of the state of Florida. Those were the only ones that I was able to see that did make the transition. So the question then posed again by the mayor as discussing the position of the city attorney. I did follow the initial discussion and provide those as you see as non-charter officers, but again, refer to this council's decision. However, there are over 410 municipalities, and during my research, I was unable to find a single one. Now, I can't tell you that I know every single city's charter in the state of Florida, but I'm not aware of my colleagues and otherwise any town attorney being a non-charter officer for many of the reasons that the mayor just alluded to. It's not ministerial, it's providing a direct line of communication and representation to the town council as a holding position with a town executive officer. That would be the only one that I would need further direction on, and then we can discuss the discussion I had was this one, general election versus special election. So I think we should deal with both of those two parts and also defer to Jim if he has anything to add.
I concur with our town attorney regarding the attorney side of the charter discussion, and similarly as to the relative pluses and minuses as it relates to whether we're at a general election in November or a special mail election. I just want to qualify that mail-in side because unlike a mail-in ballot for a general election, absentee-wise, these actually, work the other way, as it were. Every registered voter in any of our shores would actually receive a ballot relative to the charter changes from the supervisor of elections office, as opposed to requesting made initially by people to get it. So that is just a detail that I want council to be aware of when you're discussing the relative pluses and minuses of each process.
Okay, so it's a passive system. The voter doesn't have to request the ballot, they would just get it, because that's the only way to vote. So one could make the argument that the residents, taxpayers, and voters would be more focused on this because they've got to open it up, get it, look at it, and either fill in the ballot, send it in or not.
I can add just very briefly to that, Mr. Mayor and Council. There are, as of my conversation with Ms. Swan a week ago, there are 4,117 registered voters of the town of Indian Shores. Every single one of them, as Mr. Harvey mentioned, will receive it, assuming it is not in conjunction with any candidate election. And so what I mean by that is if there are any candidates up for position, then it falls back to the traditional election, precincts, polling stations, poll workers, all those. Her suggestion was, and again, given part of the town's typical seasonal aspect,
But you do it on a different date.
you do it on a different day. And her suggestion was if we're maybe targeted in January, certainly even people that would receive forwarding may more likely be here to receive, but everybody will receive it. And the offset cost-wise is that instead of having precincts and polling workers, you were saving that. You wouldn't have any of those. She indicated that every precinct polling station has at least 10 because of the time frame of an election, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and all. So there would be a savings there that's offset by the cost of the mail.
So it's actually less expensive?
It will be virtually on the same level because of the requirement for mailing.
Posting mail.
Yes.
All right, well, it seems to make sense to me, but let's break these down for discussion purposes. So, first issue, the town attorney being put back in as a charter officer. Is there any further discussion on that, or do we have agreement on that? Okay, so you're back in.
Thank you.
So you can undelete the legislative version.
May I call that very quickly?
Sure.
Say is the language as I proposed it for this town clerk appropriate, making it non-charter, moving it over into a separate section. Do that?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else can.
So will the town attorney wording be the same as it is in the other charter?
It will be exactly the same as it is in the current charter.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now next on the mail-in ballot, we may or may not have more discussion with council. Personally, I like the idea of getting people who are focused on it, them getting a ballot passively without having to request it. I like the fact that it's not an additional cost. And since we can do it with some certainty where we wouldn't have to then switch back to a ballot election if we do it on a different date, that checks all my boxes, but I'll defer to council for discussion.
Just so I understand, so this would just be a separate mailing with the charter?
Exactly.
And nothing else on it other than approving the charter?
That's correct. I mean, the only other thing would be if you added another referendum question, such as an ordinance or otherwise, but as it's presumed right now, it would solely be questions for the charter.
Okay, so if you send it out to all the residents, is there a percentage of answers you need to get before it's approved, or? You know what I mean?
No quorum required.
Yeah,
It would have to be approved by a majority.
Of those that cast the votes.
That's
that's it. Okay.
I mean, but it would be.
Okay, so
I
you
would
get
say it
10
would be-
yeses, that's it.
Yes, ma'am. I would say it would be similar to just if we were to have a general election, if there were 4,000 registered voters, only 2,000 showed up, and 700 voted in favor of it, that would be the majority of the votes cast.
Mr. Chair, we're going to give it
Are we allowed, as part of the mailing, to include an insert explaining why we're doing that?
So there are two levels to that. It is allowed for councils to act on behalf of referendum items. My suggestion is, given also the technology availability that we have through pushing out things from our website and otherwise, to do it independent and prior to, not within the actual ballot, such that they could have that a week, a month, whatever would be an appropriate time period ahead. I don't know, and I have not had that conversation with Ms. Swan, what would be allowed to be included within the actual mailing of the ballot.
Well,
But
yeah. How many registered voters here get our email newsletter? That would be, I would ask if the town attorney, who has a council agreed at least to check that out. It'd be nice to have a one-page insert explaining, you know, from my perspective as being on the tribal review committee, why we did it. We wanted to give the maximum flexibility for the town. We wanted to streamline the document. We want to, administratively make things cleaner with people reporting to the town manager, or the taxing district. So people, because when they see that document with all, you know, when you get to this thing, you see all the stuff moving around, and people who haven't sat in this meeting say, whoa, what the hell went on? What were these guys doing? It would be nice if we could to have some bullet points, if we're allowed, just to say, this is why we went ahead and did it.
And what's the difference between a regular ballot when we vote on things and we only get like this much to explain what's going on? I mean, doesn't that open up a precedent for everything else that you need approval on? Let's just have a mail to everybody to ask about something rather than waiting for the ballot.
Well, I don't think it'd be a precedent because this is specifically being generated by the town. So it's effectively a referendum by the town. Whatever the county does or whatever the state does, I don't think applies.
So I think it's a good.
Yeah, I mean, what keeps it from happening for everything else?
Well,
Is what I'm asking.
Okay,
What
well,
keeps it happening is our direction. So at the last charter review meeting we had, I thought we all resolved we wanted to do this in as transparent a process as possible, and we were going to have an educational campaign so that people weren't, technical term, freaked out when they see this document with deletions all over the place. I know for a fact, because I looked into it, that for a couple $1,000, we can do a separate mailing in advance of the ballot and have that explanation to our voters and taxpayers that this is what's happening. You know, basically, don't freak out. This is just a legislative version. We did mostly clean up the only substantive issues. We can bullet point 4 or 5 items that we had, educate them, put them on the website as well, but actually going to mail it to people. I was thinking, you know, I had an epiphany when we were talking to these HOAs. You know, we have governments within governments in our town. You know, the HOAs are really kind of mini governments, and if we get the HOA presidents through Jim, we have contact information for all of them. You know, the HOAs can get the word out through their HOA associations that this is what's coming down the pike and educate them as well. My concern about just throwing this out in a mail-in ballot is the problem that I think you're highlighting, which is, you know, you get a massive thing, a massive issue, and, you know, by statute, you know, they're only allowed 90 words, I think, to describe 75 words to describe something that could be, you know, hugely impactful. I think there should be more transparency in that, certainly at our level. And so I think we can solve all these problems by on our own, making sure that ahead of this mail-in vote, we do everything we can to alert people what's happening and why. If that makes
So it's
sense.
kind of like campaigning.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
So to be clear,
not campaign, it's educating.
there's no prohibition on local government providing truly objective educational information.
Okay.
It does happen regularly.
Sure.
The main question I'll have for Ms. Swan, it doesn't sound like it's, the idea for this council is to include it with the actual ballot because there would want to be some education as a lead up to. So it would be a precursor. But I'll clarify that with her. I will also clarify costs. We can get the list, as you said, Mr. Mayor, of all of the registered voters, bring it or short ahead of time for a cost and go forward from there. The only question to follow on from that would be, generally speaking, would a January, February, I need to ask her that because she has to work backwards to tell me when I have language. So you don't have to decide right now, but maybe for next meeting, if you could consider whether you think February, January, March, any of those months.
From my perspective, anything, again, for transparency, anything in the window of, let's say, November to April works for me, because that's when the bulk of our residents are here.
I just don't want to be.
I wouldn't want to do it in August or July.
Of course not.
Because all the mail will be forwarded.
Right.
Okay, so I will follow up with Ms. Swan about all of those questions, provide information, and I will be cooperating on providing as much background so you make informed decisions and pass that on next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just briefly, we will put together for the council to review what we would think would be the best condensed type of thing to put out from an educational standpoint. We briefly discussed pushing this out, as you referenced earlier. I think at least a couple of mailings, and then certainly direct mailings to registered voters in advance, so they can be fully aware. And we'll have a plan set up for your review and approval.
Thanks. And, the best way of doing this is find out somebody else that didn't copy it, because this isn't the first time in the history of the state of Florida that this has occurred, so.
I have no intention of wasting your time or mine.
Thank you, and all great comments, though. So I think we have to move forward on this.
Now, Mr. Mayor, before we move off this topic, there was a couple comments that I presume came from the town.
Now we're moving to the specific comments.
Oh,
I'm
I'm sorry.
We got the two substantive issues out of the way that were brought up, and now we can move to council member specific comments on language changes and legislative version. And we did receive a comment from a member of the public, I'll say that, about pagination and punctuation and things like that. It's very, very important that in the final product, we have a carefully crafted document, but I think when we're doing drafts, things happen in drafts that don't happen in final versions, so maybe I'm just a little sloppier than the average person when it comes to drafts, but I think the point's well taken from when we get a near final version. We want to see as close as possible.
Yes, sir.
So with that, why don't we start from left to right, just so we have a semblance of order on these comments.
Well, the only thing I had was, would have been Article 4-2-2 referendum. There's a comment, I wonder about the actual effect, given that A1A is a state road, which we can control as a referendum regarding state road A1A. My attitude would be to leave that in there. I think if it's taken out, people will not understand that nuance, and will think that down the line, we want to make A1A 2 lanes in each direction, so incorrect would be my attitude there.
No additions or subtraction.
Okay, I agree with the A1A. It's probably of no effect, but sometimes leaving something be is the best thing to do, because I think it does signal maybe we would be doing something even if we didn't have the opportunity to do it. So I'm fine with that. I think the remainder of the language changes are fine. The only comment I was going to make, and I didn't do it myself, was I'm sure we're going to double check the exciting part of this, which now goes all the way to the back, which are meets and bounds of the town, because that has changed over time. While while I was informed that, we could keep ahead of it, I think it's important that, we're accurate. We're only gonna do this once every decade or so. So I think we should spend the time and effort to make sure that our meets and bounds are accurate in the town. Other than that,
So do you need to resurvey all of these?
no, there's a lesser
Okay.
thing that we can do to just make sure that if something was annexed, make sure it's included. It's basically a survey light, very survey light, to just go through and see all the parameters where things stand. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Hendricks?
I concur with what you just said.
Thank you.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Great. All right, so thank you everyone for the work. I say this often, but it can't be said often enough, and that is that it really is a pleasure to work with people who do their homework and really make such great comments, and that's not just the members of council, it's our staff as well. Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to move to staff updates, which are 9A is building official report. Statistics.
Mr. Mayor, we have someone out sick today, another person on pre-planned vacation, so Mr. Martinez is manning the station over there. So I will just give a brief report on building statistics. As you might have noticed, there is obviously activity at the Blue. The third building is now getting pretty close to popping out, and the clubhouse and amenities building has been, or plans for those have been provided to the department for permit review. The Surf's Edge, they're on the second floor slab right now in regards to their construction, and other than that, the statistics and Councilor Brown already take note of your comments, just jumping ahead about the inability to read the legend on some of those, and I apologize for that. We're going to work on that, already talked to Chief about that. It's kind of, it'll be something in an Excel spreadsheet that'll be much clearer. And I appreciate you bringing that up, and also just conducting some ongoing reviews of the format information, just so everybody's getting what they want. And if there's something in council wants additional, just please let us know. So that's what we have with the building department. We did review a new prospective building inspector. It was very good. Our HR person is discussing terms and conditions of employment probably as we speak, and so we hope that will all work out. He's a very experienced individual. So that's what we have.
So when we hire the new building inspector, will that mean that the temporary outside help will be gone?
No. The volume at this point in time doesn't work for that. The good thing about our workflow, our ability to change it, is that our outside contractors have the ability to constrict or expand, and it's especially in the area of plan review, which is very limited. As you know, even if there's a small reconstruction or something, windows or something like that, they've got to do a plan, they've got to submit it for review and permitting. So that's the way that we manage prospective increases or decreases in volume, which is our outside. So that's what I have for them.
Could you get an update on the account clerk search?
Yes.
He's stepping in for Lewis when he gets to the town manager report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
All right, so that's what I have on the building official report system.
Terrific, thank you. Activity in building permits, are you seeing some kind of waning, or is it?
It's, right now it's staying pretty steady on the permit side, only because I think sometimes what we see about this period of time is people are planning when they may be leaving for larger scale construction to come in during the summer. So it seems a little counterintuitive, but we see that permit increase while people are here, and then the actual construction piece.
So we're going back to seasonality, is kind of.
I think so. It might be a little too early to tell, but it seems that everything that has occurred nationwide, COVID and all that people tend to be getting back to routines previous to 2020.
All right, thank you. Anything else for Mr. Jorge Martinez? All right, we'll move to 9B, which is the town treasurer report.
In regards to the report, I really don't have anything above and beyond what I've already reported to you. I've already issued financial statements to the finance committee. We are, however, waiting on one piece of information from an outside vendor. So the audit is ready to be presented, it will be presented at the April 7th meeting, but we are still waiting on that one piece to finalize the audit. So that is where we are at in the finance department. Bill, for any questions?
Any questions for our town treasurer? I have a comment, which is, I told individually before he came in, thank you again for making this stuff so understandable, even a lawyer can understand it. So, and the special report you did for us was well prepared as well, so thank you. Keep up the good work. Item 9C, Chief Rosetto.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have one thing to bring up in your questions. We are required by law to submit our crime reports, called uniform crime report to the feds on an annual basis. We have the results of last year's crime report, and we are down 41% in property crimes. Which did not come by accident. We put a lot of work into it. Jim has allowed us to increase some of the patrols during the day and allow me some flexibility. We're doing some very important increase. We have one increase, and it's consistent with the national trends, and that is domestic violence. Everybody is seeing an increase in domestic violence. Unfortunately, we're fine with it. I think it has a lot to do with people being cooped up together for a long period of time. I talked to a couple of physicians that blame the virus itself on what it does to the mind, as well as the possibility of the vaccine and what it does to the mind. But I think by next year we're going to see that number go back down to either 1 or 0, which is where it should be. But that's not problematic.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Domestic violence, same growing up, you watch all the cop shows, they always talk about having psychological training for police officers to deal with these people, that you have enough training. And now that brings to deal with these people on a get along per se.
Okay, great question. You're bugging my office, obviously. We've been looking for the right
You know what you used to do, right?
Yes. We're looking for the right school to send the guys and the girls to. I don't want to just rubber stamp it. We just found the right school. I'm sending half a dozen people. It's almost April. In April, they're going to very intensive domestic violence training. I'm sending the supervisors and our youngest officers who have never seen a domestic dispute. They need to go. I filled in on the domestic dispute during Christmas. We were really short-handed with people on vacation, so I went and I babysat the individual going to his soon-to-be ex-wife's house to get his property, and because I've done this so many times, I asked the right question, did the right thing. I pulled 2 loaded handguns out of the house before we entered the house, which should have been caught before that. And so the guys who were involved in that are going to that domestic violence. Some great questions. So we're on it.
Mr. Mayor, if I may just briefly, I really want to commend the chief on that extra training. FDLE requires a lot of personal officers to do a minimum, and it's domestic violence is part of that. But we know the dynamic is so different, and I, of course, encourage that. I'm very glad that, and we all should be within that additional training.
Anything else for the chief?
Thank you for knocking down the property crime to extent that.
I was worried because of what Jim could tell you what the county was experiencing during COVID. They had an increase out there. It wasn't any fault of the police, it was just people, I guess, panicking during COVID and robbing houses.
I think people wearing masks. No, seriously.
No, you're right.
I think that's what, when you look what happens out in California, I mean, just a day or two ago, right in the middle of the day in Beverly Hills, right over Rodeo Drive, a store was broken into in broad daylight, and $3 to $5 million worth of jewelry, and everybody's wearing a mask, so.
I completely agree with you.
Well, I just want to commend you, your department. You know, we had a fairly significant tragedy in our community, and your officers acted in an exemplary fashion. And I don't want to go into detail on that, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And, you talk to your men and they say, well, we're just doing our job. Well, you can just do your job and then you can do it in an exemplary fashion. And things like that are a great comfort to the people in our community. And so, thanks.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. I know that the men and women know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anything else on the chief? All right, Public Works Department.
Mr. Mayor, as Larry Bryan comes up, I just want to note to council and ask that this be added. This is Larry Bryan, who's our Public Works Director. I think it's really important that council gets information firsthand about what's going on both campus-wide and town-wide, because Larry's really on point on all that stuff. So I'm very happy to have him start coming back to the reports.
Perfect, thank you.
Morning, not me.
How we doing this morning?
Yeah, how do you feel about this, Larry?
I just want to give you guys a brief overview of what we do daily and weekly between me and Maxwell, my associate. We follow the facility maintenance repairs pretty closely. If we have something come up, we try to jump right on top of that. We monitor A1A and the town roads daily for road hazards, drainage issues, signage repairs, vegetation management, so forth. We also coordinate with the town and public safety employees on various tasks daily as needed. Work with the town contractors, engineers, overseeing progress on current and future projects that we have going on. Directly communicate with FPL and FPL contractors on any active utility projects within the town. So if we have something that we cleaned up, I try to make sure that it gets done behind them correctly. Also work with the FDOT and FDOT contractors on quarterly inspections. Monitoring the town cemetery maintenance and interments as well. And then we have a couple town projects that we have going on now with the Indian and Seminole Rain stormwater retrofit. That is currently in the staging process that we have. I'm working with Joe Bear, with the project manager directly, just coordinating daily with them as far as material staging, that process, and going forward. The Indian and Seminole Lane maintenance dredge, that's another project where we have ongoing at this point in time. We're waiting on permitting from the Army Corps of Engineers for that. So, some future projects that I'm working with Jim and the town staff on is possibly remodeling the town sign at A1A here in Red Turk Drive. Upgrade and replace the existing landscape lighting that we have, because we have some faulty areas out there that it's nighttime drives, you can't see it really well. Re-landscape the historic anchor out front here. It's kind of off balance a little bit compared to the rest of the landscape that we have. And then looking into design and upgrade the courtyard area behind us here, give us something a little more pop for everybody to look into there. And then repaint the interior of the community center. And then we have some stuff with the public safety interior hardening as well. We've got some things that we need to upgrade within the building there. And then the FEMA lot grounds repair, which involves grading asphalt buildings, possibly making parking areas for John's Island access as well. So, if there's any questions for you guys, just let me know. Go ahead.
Oh, I guess I'll go. The, on A1A, the utility company is always there. We got the cement utility poles,
Yes, sir.
we got the wooden poles. Eventually, we're gonna get down to one pole, or we're always gonna have a cement and a wood pole next to each other.
And I want to mention real quick that Larry, great experience. He used to work with FPL. He's such a good background. He's the perfect person to be asking about that.
So my thoughts on it were that they were going to eliminate most of the wood poles, but I've noticed on the east side of A1A, they've been replacing wood poles with wood poles. So I'd actually have to talk directly with Irby about that and see why the reason is behind it. Because I have noticed going down Old Beach Road, it's been replaced with concrete poles. And I'm imagining that the transmission side of things, probably the concrete poles with wood poles in between is more of like a stabilization base, so forth. It's like a concrete pole for like the center post, and then you have your down the fence line, you have a normal wood pole
dirty with wood poles, and when it came time for hurricane, we were better suited with cement poles.
Yeah, I've seen cement walls leaning with the wind too,
There's no
so.
difference than that. Just ugly.
Question.
Vice Mayor?
Larry,
Yes, sir.
in your day-to-day activities, is your so-called inspection and oversight limited to town property, or does it also include properties within the town that might appear in need of repair, overgrowth, unsightly appearance?
I focus more on the town-owned roads that we have, where I see it with A1A, Winter Beach. As far as inspection of other properties, that would probably be more on the code enforcement side of things, which I haven't been assigned to of anything like that, but mainly, you know, we kind of monitor Double Trail, and I notify the county of their overgrowth problems there as well, if something comes up. If there's something outside of the town that, you know, that we don't monitor ourselves, I do try to notify, you know, communicate with either the residents of that area. We've had some issues right here on A1A where a residents allow overgrowth come over, you know, onto our right of way, which we're not really responsible for within the town ourselves, or the FDOT is not responsible either. So I've had a few times where I've had to knock on the door and, you know, ask them to, you know, throw back or pull it.
The reason I asked the question is there's a building across the street where property across the street where the people working for FDOT on the reconstruction of A1A are concerned about the appearance of that property.
Right.
You're aware of the property I'm speaking of?
Yes, this lot directly across the
Yeah.
street here, yes. I didn't really get involved with the actual A1A project besides, you know, just helping actually coordinate the traffic control through here, which was a nightmare at one point with us, but I haven't directly spoken with anybody on that property directly yet, no sir. But I can look into it.
It might be a good idea. A couple of residents have broached that subject with me,
Okay.
and I haven't done anything meaningful about it. So I'm glad you're here today, so I can ask the question. So,
Yeah, I will take a note of it and look into it for you.
That's good. I'm aesthetically challenged, so, you know, I don't notice these things, but now that I think that it is somewhat unsightly, and, you know, maybe that's something for code enforcement as well. I mean, if there's something that can do that, so. Thank
that
you.
would be great.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Mr. Elder?
Did I understand you, earlier you said that you're meeting with the FDOT contractor on a quarterly basis regarding the maintenance of A1A?
So they contact me quarterly, they do a quarterly light inspection, as far as the street lights go, which is also,
Is that Lewisburger?
Lewisburg, yes, sir. I work directly with Patty, who is the area manager for here, so that's my one contact as far as FDOT goes.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, yeah, they're taking over the contract from the previous firm who went belly up. I can't think of the name of the firm. Right at the moment. We had a lot of problems at that firm in terms of maintenance of the right on the edge of the road where the bike lane was. We had foliage going out actually into the bike lane when I'd be riding up, and I'd have to duck or go into them. Now, they did have somebody finally come past and do a trim with a machine where it runs up on the side, but if you could keep after that from a number of perspectives. First of all, if foliage is coming across a tree or something in the lane, but also what's important, which these guys don't think about a lot, is grass grows out onto the bike lane. So it actually ends up constricting the bike lane because you don't want to run a narrow tire across that grass, particularly when it's wet. You'll slide and go into the lane. And then there's another aspect to it as well, in terms of foliage, is a lot of signs. You can't see them until you're right up on top of them. So they finally did that cut, but you have to keep it, because the previous firm, I used to complain all the time. I'd bring it up in NPO meetings when I was the chairman of it, and got no place with FDOT. So I'm glad to hear that you're having this ongoing meetings, crack the whip.
Yeah, definitely. We've actually had to go to some extent before Lewisburg actually came back in place, where we actually went to the trimming ourselves through there.
Oh, I imagine it did.
Because we have a lot of vine growing down and so forth. So yeah, I'm definitely staying on top of that. If there's ever any stretch of A1A or areas that you are concerned with, just feel free to shoot me an email or shoot you an email.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to look into it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for Larry?
One final comment, this wasn't our idea, this was Jim's idea.
I'm sweating underneath my shirt.
But I'm glad he did, because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know when I'm in the Public Works Department, and it's great to know the work is out there being done by somebody who's so dedicated, so thank you.
I appreciate it.
And it impacts the quality of life.
Absolutely, it does, yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'll just briefly follow up on the two cases that we discussed, just to add a little bit, not very much. As far as our state litigation case with the city of Vero Beach related to the used water issue, again, as you alluded to, Mr. Mayor, we were still waiting for a decision on the motion for summary judgment from Judge Crew. Hopeful for that to come out any day. As soon as we receive that, I certainly will disseminate that to all of council. But until that time, it's simply with her, and she's evaluating it. So I am in contact regularly with outside counsel Paul Berg on that, and to the extent any aspect of the case moves forward, I'll provide you an update. But there hasn't been anything from the city of Vero Beach on that. On the federal case, again, the motion to dismiss, as you mentioned, will be on April 11th, Monday, 8:15 in the morning at the federal courthouse in person. I will also be present along with Mr. Harper and our outside counsel, Bruce May and Kevin Cox from Holland Knight.
I'm going to attend as well.
Yes, and you said that.
This is an in-person hearing, it's not a Zoom hearing, so I feel a town representative should attend.
Absolutely.
I would invite anybody in council that wants to attend. What do we have to do, sit in different rows, nice and talking to each other and things like that? What did you call it once, a kabuki dance? But I think, I think it's important that, interest be shown from the actual council, and I'm not suggesting everybody has to show, but I will, and anybody who's interested will go as well.
You said 8:15?
It is 8:15. I'll just send you that. April 11th. I'll send you that for sure. The only other update I can add with that is that our outside counsel has, I think, been able to secure an agreement from the city of Vero Beach to dispense with mediation, since we went through such a long process with the 164 pre-litigation. So in order to not have to do everything again twice, that's being submitted to the court, and we're very hopeful that that also would be approved, and if approved, we'll continue to expedite the matter. That's going to be pending on an update on that as soon as I receive the order. The only last thing I have for my report that covers any litigation, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. But I prefer to speak with any of you individually, as always appropriate whenever we're talking about ongoing litigation. The last is that, as you know, I attend the planning, zoning, and variance board meetings. We have new members. We have a full board right now. But one of the issues that has come up as requested from the PCMD board would be related to a potential ordinance change for notification of properties and the variance that's being requested or something of that like. We currently do not have anything like that in our code. That is found in a lot of other codes, city bureau, county, nationwide. But the only thing I would mention is this would be a one-off change. It would be an ordinance change that would be a one-off. And as Mr. Harper, I think, has mentioned, we are in the process of doing a talk about a review of the land development code that will be in process and take several months. So really,
Pardon me for interrupting.
Sure.
I want to hopefully achieve clarity on an issue.
Yes.
Danger is, I may confuse it. But two things have kind of percolated up to me, and one is notifying the, neighbors, let's call it neighbors, not just abutting landowners, of potential variance changes, which many jurisdictions have. I think it's a good idea for us to look into. And, we are undertaking a full-scale review of the land development code that's probably 2023.
Yes, sir.
And, if we did a one-off ordinance, we would likely have to then supersede that ordinance. So I don't mind additional work for this council, but if we're going to address it, that's fine. So my question on the first topic, and then we'll get to the revising the applications for variances and revamping that, which is issue 2, is can we just do this administratively for the time being? While it may not have any force of law, can we require the applicants to notify people within what we would propose to be the new provision of the land development code?
I think we could respectfully request it.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, but I don't believe we'd be able to enforce it to the extent that, because again, it would not be the effective law. Ordinances of the effective law. So if somebody were emboldened to challenge and say, it's not in the ordinance, it's not required, therefore, I don't really care.
Well, I'm only talking about this interim basis, so,
Sure.
we're a pretty neighborly friendly community.
I agree.
If a request were made part of the application, for example, an application for a construction permit, we have an appendage now that says, tell us your traffic plan. There's no ordinance about that, it's just part of the paperwork that, in order to process the paperwork, we say, okay, if you're gonna have 2 18-wheelers coming in and dropping things off, blocking the road, tell us what the plan is so that we can make sure that emergency vehicles can get in and things such of that nature. So what I'm asking, in simple terms, is on an interim basis till we get to that, let's find a way to at least without force of law, have the local property owners notified. If we have the applicant do it, great. If they don't do it, they say, we're not doing it because it's not part of the ordinance. I guess we could have, the building department, figure out who the neighbors are and say, you may want to know there's a variance, being applied for. We'd love to know what you're going to hear about this in the homeowners association.
And thank you for clarifying, Mr. Mayor, Council. I think if it were a burden that we tried to make the applicant comply with, they would have the hour saying it's not effective law. If we internally take it upon ourselves to recognize this property within 250 feet, 500 feet, whatever an appropriate radius would be, and we notify them, much like you see signs along A1A for this is a prospective development, redevelopment that the county is doing, the city is doing. You see those placards are anywhere from 18 to 24. They might be 4 by 8 in other jurisdictions. We could do that, and that would allow us to feel comfortable that we've notified the appropriate individuals within whatever radius would be. We could do that.
Well, I don't know, I'm interested in other comments, but, I think as an interim step, while we're sorting this all out, the land development code revisions, it makes sense to at least have, some kind of notification process. And there's nothing to prevent us from putting on an application for a variance or construction permit. If you notified, neighbors within 250 feet, if they say no, well, then we do it. If they say yes, then I think we got our answer. So,
Yes, sir.
anyway, that's all the same. Mr. Andrews.
Zoning department still done now is that when a variance request comes in, we always make sure that the HOA or the county association has seen it and concurred with it. It's also a requirement on the application that you get notification from your neighbors.
Your neighbors, yes.
And point to prove that point is in this month's meeting results, one of the items was that make a recommendation to the town council for approval with the condition that written documentation be provided showing support by joint property manager, property owners. So that process is still being followed, and we want more transparency and more neighbors participating in whether they agree or not agree with variances added to the form. We want within 250 feet, left or right, for the applicable neighbors to concur or not concur what's being asked.
Absolutely, and that's why I brought it from the planning and zoning board. My thought was active planning and zoning board, and they're very competent individuals, very vested in trying to make this as transparent a process as possible. And if they're willing to look into, make a recommendation, I don't have a recommendation that 250 feet, 500 feet is appropriate. It varies throughout the state of Florida. But if the planning and zoning board were to do some research on their own and collectively in a meeting come up with a suggestion, 300 feet, whatever it is, then we could do that. But I think that would be appropriate for them to look at as part of their duties. They do that, so if, that was my recommendation, why I brought it to this council.
All right, I mean, it seems to work for me. So.
And if you got a condo or a homeowner association, you really need to get requirement, because they're addressing for all the residents. So when you're not in the condo HOA, you need that extra protection.
Yes, sir.
Right, we're fairly limited non-HOA neighborhoods.
Very much.
You know, I don't want to create a problem that doesn't need fixing, but I think if there's a simple solution to it, then, yeah, do it, and we can also do it in conjunction with the land development code. So how does everybody feel about this? Let's, you know, convert. Yep. And they may want to do it also, I saw in the minutes that they're thinking about revamping their applications, so.
Right.
Not that I'm in love with my own idea, which can happen sometimes, but, you know, even if it's a voluntary reporting requirement on an interim basis, if they're going to revise their applications anyway, having notified people within whatever zone that they want to do it, I think that's a good first start.
Absolutely. I'll follow up with that, and that will happen. And that dovetails into the second part, which is the application, just to bring it more to a concise, clear, straightforward application. Again, as you referenced earlier, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. This was based on a model from another jurisdiction, and as you see in the notes, was pretty uniformly embraced by the Planning and Zoning Board. Just wanted to get the council's feel for making sure that that would be appropriate.
Terrific, thank you. Anything else for town attorney? All right, thank you very much. Now we have item 11, which is the town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to let everyone know that our town attorney and myself met with Florida City Gas representatives, and their council received a draft franchise agreement for them to come into the town that's being evaluated by council, and that's pretty much the report on Florida City Gas. They obviously want to come in, and they will be reaching out to individual, HOAs about, desires or, for gas. But that's status where we are right now.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
on that? Do we have any idea, because they're supposed to be bringing in tanks, right, with gas?
Well,
Like, do we have any idea where they're gonna go?
it's a tiered process
Right.
for
So it's
for Florida City Gas. And there's a balance between when they permanently get everything set up versus them bringing, I think tanks is probably maybe a misnomer. They have some trucks that will help with their process until they get everything finally done. We are discussing whether or not those could be appropriately placed in our FEMA lot. Very, very preliminary discussions. In the end, they will be seeking some space or some location on town property for, I don't want to get into technical details because I'll mess it up. But basically their pressure and push out station, which is, always landscaped and covered, and we very, very generally talked about some of those things. But the idea is that to get them going before everything was finalized, they would put some temporary equipment down in the lot and go from there. However, timing-wise, we're not talking about anything in 2022 at all, because they are still moving, judiciously through all the jurisdictions and all the HOAs.
So they wouldn't put them in the neighborhoods?
I don't know that they would need to, because they're going to be run through utility easements underground.
Okay.
And then the question then becomes a desire relative to going into the various, for the neighborhood desire. In other words, does whatever HOA or community want them, to come in.
I know the vice mayor, but just trying to be helpful. I think Councilmember Smith's question is, they're not going to be various tanks located up and down Indian River Shores anyway, permanently. There'll be a central pumping facility somewhere, who knows where, that pumps it through the easements, across the bridge onto the island. But as a temporary basis, while they're getting the system up and running, they're thinking about having trucks? Is that what I'm?
I describe them that way, but they would be on the FEMA lot. They're smaller.
Okay.
And when we get there, I will get photos and information and graphics and drawings. It's just that we are at such preliminary discussions because they're not even sure as we stand right now whether they'll meet that. Yeah.
But permanently, they're not gonna be burying tanks?
No. Unlike the tanks you might have in your yard for.
No, I'm just talking about the temporary tanks till they get up and running, because
No.
we're gonna put one somewhere for 3 years.
It's not as if you would see those things along A1A in any far stretch. No,
Thank you.
not even close.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
I have a question about the approval process. Can you describe the stages of approval down to starting, I presume, with the town and then going down to the individual residences, including HOAs?
Well, preliminarily, we would start with a franchise agreement, and then it would follow up with permitting. Essentially, the right-of-way permits or utilization permits, because they are going in established rights-of-way, regardless. And I don't know, and the people who's in the conversation with me, I didn't get the impression that they had already reached out to the individual HOAs to begin those discussions about tying in to their property, but that was their prospective plan. So overall, it's initially the council approving an ordinance for the franchise agreement,
Right.
and then the appropriate utilization of right-of-way permits being filed along with the appropriate plans and communication with the town about what they're doing in the rights-of-way and in the town streets. And then there would, of course, be the secondary or probably concurrent discussions with the individual HOAs as to whether or not those individual HOAs want to authorize them to come into their communities.
Specifically with regard to Johns Island, would one step in that process be Johns Island Property Owners Association and then each individual HOA, or would it go directly to the HOAs?
We've had, my corporate John's Island General Manager, we've had preliminary discussions with them as well about they would come in if the desire was there, bore all lines and all the easements within John's Island, and then it'd be per homeowner if they wanted to hook up or not. They would put a hookup connection in front of every single facility inside of John's Island for the residents to choose to connect or not.
So an HOA would have to approve the line coming in,
Correct.
right? And then each individual homeowner within the HOA would decide whether or not wanted to be hooked up to the line.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, didn't they survey us on that?
They surveyed us like a year ago.
Yeah,
When they were first talking.
they asked us, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can just very briefly follow up on Vice Mayor's comment. This is similar, if you will, to a water meter in the sense that Florida Gas would bring it to a point that would be right at your property line. They would be responsible for all of that maintenance, and then assuming, they're not required to, but assuming a property owner wanted to connect to gas, then that would require a building permit submission through our department, because that's effectively now modifying the life health safety of the home to make sure it's installed by a proper installer. So it would be no different than, say, a plumber coming in and make sure that their water line from meters is correctly connected, or the electric is correctly connected. So there will be a permitting process for individual homes, assuming that somebody wants to sign off.
Anything further? Mr. Elmer?
I would ask that Florida City Gas give us a presentation prior to approving the franchise agreement, explaining how mechanical this is going to work, the boring, the disruption to properties, whether it's going to be visible in the town right away or the communities right away. I think we need to see all that prior to signing on the dotted line on a franchise agreement. And I think the community would like to be able to see that as well. Hopefully by that point, we'll have all our AV equipment set up so that we can have that up on our website so that our citizens could view this.
Mr. Mayor, just on that point, and if I didn't mention this in individual meetings, my apologies, we're planning on April 24th for Florida City Gas to come to a presentation, and associated with that as part of my report, we have installation with BIS and Compath and our website person scheduled for the first week in April. All of that subject to, the final equipment getting in and installed and being up. One way or another, again, we anticipate first that's being here on the 24th. And whether or not we have the website fully up and going, we're going to be able to live stream that through YouTube. That was the plan all along, certainly. And because it's an ordinance, there have to be, readings. So and that's why I emphasize so much of this is really very preliminary because we haven't even had SCG in front of us yet to talk about it. We just have this preliminary meeting. So that's tentatively planned for the time.
I appreciate that, and, I appreciate Councilman Alwater's remarks as well as those of the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Smith. I think, if I'm reading Councilman Alwater's comments correctly, it's kind of the same sense I got, and I know you've been on top of this, Jim, but I get the impression Florida City Gas thinks they're a little further ahead of us than they are, and I'm not saying it's intentional, but I think they need to understand that there's a process here that they're going to have to really persuade us in terms of what this all means, whether the franchise agreement makes sense for the people in our community. And there are some questions that have been coming up from HOAs, namely, if it does pass and we decide this is a good thing for Florida City Gas to come in and provide these services, don't go digging your propane tank up yet. Because, in an emergency, in a hurricane, guess what's going to happen? They're going to cut the gas lines off going to the island. That's just the natural course of events. If it's going to be a severe enough storm that you're going to want to rely upon your full house generator for an extended period of time. So, that's just one kind of consumer question. And the other questions, that people may not understand are that, how's it going to work if you sign up? There's a permitting process. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for the installation of the lines? Is it going to be prorated over the course of time in your bills, or are you going to have to pay it all up front? So, lots of questions, and I think they need to understand that we're going to want a fairly full presentation. By my count, the last time they were in front of us was 2 years ago, maybe, when they first came up with the concept. So let's.
It was a light presentation.
It was a very light presentation, but let's make sure they understand that we want. We don't want the elevator speech. We want a full presentation on what they're going to do for our community and everything from safety to the nuts and bolts of it. With that, I'm out of gas on this issue. I just couldn't wait to say that, but unless we have anything else. Okay. All right. Your next item, sir.
Just as a heads up, nothing specific, and we haven't received any official increase, but there's been some discussion about EV stations, electric vehicle charging stations, locations and things like that. They're kind of de minimis in the county right now. Some of those have really been more public inquiries to other entities, but I just want to let council know that given the now seeing higher level of frequency of those types of vehicles, notwithstanding personal charging stations in in homes, that it's been a discussion not specifically for us, but with some of the other municipalities. So I just want you to know that is out there. We're hoping to begin some of the work, award the notice this summer on the community center for the settling issue that we've had. And in addition to that, in speaking with Larry Bryant about some of our issues with trash at the community center, and it's not that the people that are renting the community center are doing anything wrong or inappropriate. It's just there's nothing there. There's nothing really to do. So we're looking at design for a pathway and path for a smaller dumpster outside of public safety. Right now, it's only inside and secure, so you can't get in there. Just to try to help the community center and the people that use it clean up a little better. I wanted to let everyone know that I'm looking into. I spoke with Mr. Corpar, now speaking with FDOT about some possible signage on the east-west east-west traffic on the main entrance to Johns Island for a straight return. It turns out that I can't go through the county conveniently. But I'm talking with our FDOT people to try to get that resolved in a timely fashion. about this. There have been a lot of grants, a lot of money related to Urban Island, Duckhead Island, and Hoghead Island, and some rehabilitation and and enhancement of the environmental situations. It looks like that the BOCC did approve capital improvement plans, so it looks like there's going to be some work there. This is nothing that will require a town permit per se, but I just want to let everyone know that this again is a little longer process, and we'll see it just in case constituents have questions. Eventually, we'll get some details about construction schedules, types of equipment, anything that people may see out and about, whether it's Riverside or otherwise. And that is, other than our meeting after this, relative to collective bargaining and executive session, that's all. Unless there's any questions.
Town clerk search process.
Oh, I'm sorry. On that process, it's still posted. We're still evaluating applications. Unfortunately, as with many job postings, as we saw with the building inspector position, you often get a lot of applications that don't meet the four squares. So we're still looking through that, evaluating that. We just want to make sure that we don't do anything precipitous and that we get the right person.
Anything else for Mr. Hargrave? All right, terrific. So item 12, council committee reports. Start with, to my left, Mr. Elwater.
I did not attend Utilities Commission meeting. The MPO did not have a meeting. There was a Treasure Coast Regional League of Cities presentation by Ed Pinal down at Vero Beach Yacht Club. The only thing, there was a discussion there, Florida League of Cities has their annual meeting in August. If we're going to send somebody, it's down in Hollywood, on the beach there at the Diplomat Beach Resort. My understanding is the rooms are kind of tight. We're going to send somebody down there. We should think about that. Now, I have attended before. I wouldn't mind going again, but if somebody else would like to attend and particularly hasn't gone before, I would defer to them. It's August 11th through 13th, so it's something we should think about pretty soon. There was one time I was going to go down there, and it turns out there was no room, so you couldn't go down. So,
All right, so,
but again, I would defer to anybody else.
no, that's, TCCLG is my assignment. I am not available those dates, so it's all yours if you want to go. And
Would anybody else like
unless
I'll be in the other state.
So,
Okay.
by all means,
I'll start.
if I have to do some paperwork to make you voting delegate, I'm happy to process that. So,
One of 1,000 people.
yes, I know.
You know,
And most of
make a
these-
difference.
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
I have nothing to report.
Okay, our committees are kind of winding down at this time of year, so.
I have something.
Yeah, so I had, Treasure Coast Council Local Governments, which, again, for the sake of brevity, we had some interesting items, and I'll, always leave those materials on file for anybody who wants to look at them, and through the town manager or through, Charlie, I will alert folks to it. Other than that, anything from you?
On the beach, the Sector 5 and Sector 3 projects are basically complete. They're just dealing with putting the seagrass in there to help save the dunes, if you will. Sector 7 is a major problem for Indian River County, and it deals with complying with standards that they established when a project would be achieved. Sector 7 is down in there where the moorings is. There is no public beach access, therefore there is no state contribution to any beach nourishment project that you would incur. There is also no beach access to put sand on the beach from a drive-through or a truck haul, which means you'd have to do it via a pumping from the ocean, which increases the cost substantially. The county gave the beach committee, or their staff another year, or asking for another year extension on the money. That was authorized by the state. This will be the third year. Federal monies doesn't usually go past 2 years. Trying for a third year, I think it's pretty impossible. Even if they got the money, the biggest holdup is the fact that some of the residents in Sector 7 do not want to sign any easements at all, and these Sector 7 folks continue with that position, the project is also not technically feasible, either environmentally or technically because of the way in which the sand has to be put on the beach. So the county, off record, I think, is saying if we don't get the extension of the money, they'll probably kill the Section 7 project. But the county has a big issue on their hands. Do they stop funding projects where they don't get 50% reimbursements from the state? But that's their issue, not ours. And Sector 7, it will probably cost, they said $6 million a mile. It's probably going to go up to 7 to 8 by the time they're done. And our Sector 4 costs $4 million a mile. So it's a very expensive operation, and it should not be borne by all the county people unless they know about it, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, and just briefly, I went to the utility meeting on March 8th, because Bob wasn't able to go, and there were some agenda items that didn't really relate to us, but the septic to sewer conversion for the barrier island, that was a big deal. Bob might be able to help me out with that, but there, Judy Orcutt and this Clean Water Coalition want to mandate the barrier island within 10 years of their ability to hook up to change the septic to sewer conversion. And it involves 446 septic systems on our side, on the barrier island. The reason they want to mandate us to do it and not them is because they say that we can afford to do it and they can't.
Well, but they have no authority.
Okay, I'm just saying that this is what they said, and then someone asked them, well, why do you think that all the lagoon people on the other side of the city, why don't they have to do it? Because they're putting nutrients into the lagoon also. And the answer to that was that their soil is different, that they have more mud and rock and we have sand, which is why our nutrients are worse than their nutrients.
That's
So-
interesting. I would percolate down faster into the sand. It would be the exact opposite.
So their connections right now, we've got Bethel Creek having to be connected by 27, Live Oak 28, and Reamar and South Beach by 29.
Yeah, well, they're all city communities.
Right, so just to put this in perspective, I know we're winding down the meeting, we have another after this. If we were to pass an ordinance to require septic to sewer conversion, we can't issue those to connect because we don't administer the water utility system. So we'd be basically, mandating an ordinance that would then have to rely upon the city of Vero Beach, who has not been terribly responsive to basic issues under our water services, much less a project like this.
Right.
Particularly with the doubt over who's going to be providing our water services going forward. About 7 or 8 months ago at I forget which meeting it was, but there was a public meeting in the city of Vero Beach. I heard for the first time that there was a program to convert septic to sewer for the entire barrier island, which includes us. And so, although I'm not sure we made an actual formal records request, we asked for any documentation, any documentation, and information on, plans, projects, expansive language, anything that the city of Vero Beach utilities have been contemplating or planning in terms of converting town of Indian River Shores septic to sewer. Nothing.
Nothing.
They don't have anything.
Right.
So sometimes people have a problem, but they're in search of a solution that just doesn't have a solution yet. And regardless of how you feel about this issue, we can stamp our feet, jump up and down, hold our breath and count to 10, but we just don't have any feasible mechanism to undertake a program until we get a utility partner that we trust and that can work with us. So that's a more complicated answer than simply we're not in a position to do it, but we're just basically not in a position to do this at this point. If there's any other comments on this.
I agree with you totally. There's also several locations on the beach that have sewers, have septic systems. And the reason why they have them is because there's no sewer lines that support them. And that will be a significant bill that you have to count in millions, not thousands.
Correct. And,
Exactly.
and we do require, with new constructions, we do require sewer hookup as opposed to septic where it is available. But then you have this other issue of private property rights. And, you know, the town, the town could find itself in an untenable legal position if, and again, not to get too complicated with statutes in terms of how far away from the line you have to be, but if you were to require the homeowner to bear an extreme cost to connect to a sewer where they are very, very remote from the sewer line, septic tanks are still legal. You know, they have certain requirements, but you know, they're still okay under state statute. You know, you probably have a very upset homeowner threatening legal action against the town because we're not providing a feasible mechanism for them to hook up to a sewer system. And they have private property rights that are protected under Florida law. So it's not as simple as waving a magic wand, saying town of Indian River Shores, pass an ordinance that says everybody's got to connect to sewer. It's a gross oversimplification of the issue.
They certainly made it sound simple.
Yeah.
And it will all be done by the completion of their advanced wastewater treatment plant in 2025.
Yeah.
And if I could throw things under
Christmas is moving.
I just wanted to tell you that.
All right, call to the audience before we tell you how we
Yes, I like what you say with things.
I'm sorry?
Would you direct my call? So then-
Yes, please, come on up.
I'm guessing I have to state my name.
Yes.
My name is Ryan Lynn, resident of the city of Sebastian. So, given that I deal with Sebastian, I know you guys mentioned stuff about charter review items. I know Sebastian last year, he had a charter review, which I saw went very, very well. Maybe you guys might want to look at the eight items he had last year. That might possibly be helpful for how you guys want to word your amendment items once the ballot. The other thing to aware of is I'm hearing that Governor DeSantis is currently negotiating with Senate President Wilson Simpson for a special session. This special session is, I believe, to be on a constitutional period, which has been stalled up for the past few years, and some insurance issue I'm not too familiar with. I just know some people that have no place for roofs because of that. So as of right now, I know those two items are currently being looked at for a special session, so perhaps you guys need some add into there as well. Maybe you guys could possibly send something to Senator Jordan, Devin Mayfield, Representative Aaron Brawl, perhaps somebody that could possibly fit it in for a possible special session.
Thank you, appreciate your comments.
Of course.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else from the audience? All right, terrific, thank you for coming. We are now adjourned.